Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is our third general body meeting presented by SHIP. So just as a quick introduction, hello, my name is Victor Rodriguez. I'm currently the academic chair of SHIP. And my status and major is I'm a senior and I major in computer science. And a fun fact, I like to play the drums. And I'll go ahead and let Jocelyn introduce herself.
All right, I'm Jocelyn Rodriguez. I am the co-event chair for this year. I'm a junior in computer science and I like photography.
So just as a quick heads up about some of our events, we have our roundtable presented next on October 8th this week. And it's going to be a discussion about how you can improve your soft and hard skills. And I think that is something everyone should attend because everyone always needs to improve those skills. Alongside such, it's a workshop pertaining to professional development and its guidance to oncoming students about CSULB life. Alongside that, I host study jams bi-weekly. The next one is on next Monday. And I use this opportunity to tutor students that come in who need assistance. I used to work as a tutor at the tutoring center. And I know that students struggle with their work, and I want to give everyone the opportunity to go ahead and really get the help that they need in an environment that allows for it. And alongside that, we picked Monday because it's better to study earlier in the week, so you're better prepared and you could better manage your time throughout the week. So if you guys needed a little extra push to get that A in your class or ace those midterms, come by. And just as a quick reminder, make sure to fill out that Google form in the chat, just so we know that you signed in. Yeah, so thank you, Josh, getting to that. We also have a scholarship opportunity available. And there are going to be 3 $200 scholarships that will be awarded by the end of the semester. And the way to be entered into that drawing will be to sign into that Google form that I sent earlier in the chat. So that way we know who attended and we will pick them at the end. And you can just go to any official SHIP meeting and you'll be entered. I'll go ahead and pass it on to Jocelyn.
All right, so an event that we have upcoming is Night with Industry. It'll be Friday, October 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. Currently, signups are open and they will be closing October 20th, which is a Wednesday, the Wednesday of the week of the event. It will be held on Zoom, and currently some of the companies that are attending are Amazon, SoCal Edison, Northrop, and Boeing. This will give you the opportunity to network with professionals, hear about their companies, and ask them questions if you might have any, whether it be about interviewing process or the company itself. Spots are limited, so we encourage you to sign up as quickly as possible. Another thing that is going on right now is RLDC planning. We are currently looking for people to get involved with our planning committee. You do not have to have experience at all. You will not be doing this alone. You will be partnered up with one of our officers and a professional. So if that sounds like something that you might be interested in, whether it be for experience or something that you just want to do, please let us know. If you have any questions, you can use the link to sign up. Yeah, that's it. This is our link tree where we have all of our socials. We have the sign up form for Night with Industry as well. So you feel free to scan it to look through all of our stuff. All right, does anybody have any questions at all about anything we went over?
Silence means yes. Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you. And going on, we will pass it on to our guest speaker today, Alex. He is the CEO of ApeTech, and he'll be telling us how we can be the best engineer you could be. Hand it over to you, Alex.
All right, so I'm going to try to make this not clickbaity. All right, so can you guys see my screen and everything okay?
Yes.
Okay. So my name's Alex. I went, well, let me go to the next slide. I went to Cal State Long Beach and graduated in 2012. So I was there from 2007 to 2012. Had a bachelor's in computer engineering, minor in computer science. Used to be the president of ACM. I did that for like a year and a half. And then I did I was the president of the Embedded Applications Technology Group, or EAT. I don't know if they still exist, but they were
Not
when I was,
sure because they
they
do
were
have
there.
Discord, but I haven't seen anyone be active
Yeah.
since the last semester, sadly.
Yeah. So I was there when like I was running that, and then right when I finished like being at Cal State Long Beach, that's when like the Maker Club started taking off. I don't know if that's still a thing, but there used to be a club with like a crap ton of 3D printers and stuff. And so we, my year with being the president of EAT is when we built the very first 3D printer that then like started a revolution at Cal State Long Beach. So that was like a really cool time. And then right after I graduated from Cal State Long Beach, I basically got a job at Boeing like right away because I was an intern at Boeing for 2 years prior to me graduating from Long Beach. And yeah, so I basically went straight to Boeing full time. And then a couple of buddies of mine, they're all going to USC, and they're like, you should come. And I go, one doesn't just show up to USC, but apparently if you have 50 grand from a check signed by Boeing, like USC will gladly take you. So I shipped them a check signed by Boeing for $50,000, and I went to USC. So I signed up on Friday and school started Monday. And that was it. That was like super easy. And so I have a master's in systems engineering. And I got that in 2015, not listed here. I worked at Boeing from 2010 until 2016, 2 years as an intern, 4 years full time. And I got roughly like $75,000 of like continuing education paid by Boeing. So I'm a certified ethical hacker. I have like a bunch of like certifications in, well, I had at one point a bunch of certifications in cybersecurity, and like everything all paid for by Boeing. And I heard just recently, I don't know, I think a couple of you may be in that in the class that I'm like assisting with teaching, the CCS. I don't even remember which one it is, 406.
406 model-based
Yeah, 406.
engineering.
Yeah, so I heard just this class, right, that Boeing's like really trying to revamp their education experience. So if you guys are seniors and you're thinking of graduating, one of the biggest deciding factors that helped me when I was picking my like where I was going to go work was that continuing education credit or ability, because a lot of companies will just give you the what's allowable by taxes, which is like $5,000 a year. And if you go to UCLA or USC or anything like that, that's like one class. But Boeing actually absorbs all that tax implication. And at least when I was there, like it was unlimited funding. So I went to the most expensive school I could find because Boeing paid 100% of it. And I think they're still doing that. So really, really go look for those kind of benefits, because like not even like your Googles or Facebooks do that, right? You're usually limited to just like $5,000. So just throwing that out there, because it's free education is always really, really good. So I worked at Boeing, I worked at Northrop, I worked at Brain Corp. That was a startup, and I don't really have any of that on my slides, but if you guys are interested about like my journey in that, we can definitely talk about it at the end if anybody wants to stick around. I do want to kind of keep the focus on the topic, but lots of experience in those big companies, and then BrainCorp being a super small startup. So if you guys are considering startups for your like full-time employment, definitely would love to chat with you and kind of give you my feedback, because working at a big like company like Northrop or Boeing versus working at a very small startup is like night and day. So you need different skills for each. And then some of the roles that I've had are mainly been in IT. I've been in DevOps for a couple of years. I was a technical program manager for a couple of years as well. And then most recently, I quit everything. I decided I had enough of working for people, and so I quit my job working for one boss to only have like 12 bosses now. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm walking in the right direction. I'm making a lot more money, I'll tell you that much, but not sure if having 12 bosses is any better than having one boss. But anyways, if you guys have any questions about that, again, I'm not really going to talk too much about it, at least for the presentation, but afterwards I could stick around and you guys can ask me whatever you guys want to ask. So anyways, that's that. Oh, and my company name, ApeTech, Little Monkey. And that's me. All right. So some of the topics I'm going to talk about today, and with full disclosure, I read a lot. I work roughly 12 to 14 hours a day. And yes, I quit my job working an 8-hour 9 to 5, only to like work almost double. But it's great. I'm my own boss, essentially, to some degree. And so I read a lot. So I am trying to grow and scale a business and hopefully turn into millions of dollars, right? And so I can't do that knowing just the very little information that I know. So I spend a great deal of my time reading. And so pretty much everything I'm going to be talking about today is just me kind of taking my real world experiences, combining that with like all the concepts and stuff of everything I read in the past, and then showing you or giving you a taste of what I've done in my career that has really, really like helped me stand out. And so these are kind of the topics we'll be talking about. Again, most of these, if not all of them, are going to come out of a book of some way, shape, or form. So in the later, if you guys want to like know the book list, let me know. But this is pretty much the titles of them. So without any further ado, let's jump into the first one. So the first thing I want to ask you guys is, what does the best engineer look like? Like, what are your specific thoughts? And feel free to come off of mute, but I'm just kind of curious, like, what do you think are characteristics or attributes of not just a good engineer, but like really like the best engineer?
I think someone with like grit, so like willing to put in extra time and effort and be able to take the time to look into a problem, even if it's going to take them a long time.
Okay, great answer. Anybody else? And there's no right or wrong answers, by the way, so in case you guys are scared, and we're not grading this, so feel free to share your thoughts. I really genuinely do want to hear, because there's a what, at least a 10-year gap between you and I right now, right? Because I'm 32, so roughly an average a 10-year gap. So I'm just kind of curious what you guys are thinking versus like me, because it's easy for me to look back and see, and you guys are looking forward and trying to figure it out, right? So I'm kind of curious, what do you guys like? What do you foresee in the future? And let me open up the chat in case anybody's typing in. A good engineer never gives up. All right. They're always communicating. Excellent. So we're definitely going to be talking about these things. Anybody else want to throw anything else before we keep moving on?
They're willing to learn.
Yep. Okay. So you're going to find these are common traits, right? And so, but I am going to be giving you a little bit more like meat to each one of these, because these are really good answers, but there's always a little bit more that you can do to go above and beyond. And then I really do think you're going to like this. So we'll start with, you have to be so good that they can't ignore you. And I wanted to start this off specifically because of the audience in this room, right? Everybody, mostly everybody, not trying to be racist or anything, but most of us are minorities, right? And as a minority, right, as what SHIP represents, right, like we inherently have a much harder problem. Like we have more obstacles, we have more things getting in our way of making it up to that top of that corporate ladder, right? In California, it's not so bad, but the second you go get jobs in other states where the population, right, like the race is 70% white or even at 50% white, like there is a really big difference in the workforce, right? Like when I worked at Boeing in Huntington Beach, it was a mixed bag, right? California is a very diverse company or state, and Boeing in California was a very diverse company. So I never really experienced like any racism or anything like being Hispanic like as that like inhibiting my ability to grow or contribute, right? But when I moved to St. Louis, because I did spend 3 years at Boeing in St. Louis, like I did notice a significant difference, right? The mindset in the Midwest where there aren't any Hispanics and where 90% of the workforce at Boeing in St. Louis is all white, like there was a lot of opportunities that I didn't get simply because of like who my last name, right? And so I wanted to start off with this because when you have the right skills and when you radiate your skills, it becomes really hard to ignore you, right? People, and a lot of those people are honestly like retiring and stuff like that, but there's a lot of corruption and bureaucracy within corporate America that I just don't even want to like I'm trying to give it to you as real as possible, right? Like a lot of people try to like sugarcoat it and stuff like that, but like especially female minorities, right? Like my wife being a female, being a minority, being an engineer, right, saw so many opportunities that passed her simply because her leadership would not acknowledge her skills, right? They would not acknowledge her at all and that she shouldn't succeed. And so I wanted to speak about this because your skills, right? Like what you can bring to the table at the end of the day is going to be super important because when you know how to do a job right and you know how to do it well, right? And you can consistently deliver those results, it becomes a lot harder for those people to justify not giving you opportunities, right? So, in order to kind of help with developing those skills and that mindset, I recommend that you go and look at your passion, right? A lot of people talk about passion and being super important, but it's got to be your passion and not someone else's passion, right? And what I mean by that is when you go get a job and you're working, right? Your boss is going to be kind of grading you, right? Grades don't go away ever. Like somebody's always evaluating you or determining your performance, right? Throughout your entire career. And those evaluations determine how you grow in the company and what opportunities are presented to you and your pay and a bunch of other stuff, right? And so a lot of like leaders, like directors and stuff like that, they try to motivate you by basically like radiating their passion onto you and trying to motivate you, right? But you have to find things that you specifically are passionate about and not what other people want you to be passionate about, if that makes any sense, right? So to do that, or the reason that's important is because to obtain skills, it takes a lot of work, right? You have to practice your trade every day, all day, if you can, right? And if you're doing something that you're not passionate about, it makes it really, really challenging to invest your time and energy, right? And if you're doing something that's like somebody else is telling you to be passionate about, like it makes it even harder because deep down, like you know that you're kind of like lying to yourself and stuff like that, right? So you're gonna read a lot of books or hear a lot about like find your passion, right? But I really do think you should take time, especially since you guys are such a young age, where you should take that second and be picky, right? And find out how do you want to define your life, right? And you don't have to pick just that one thing and that's what you're gonna do for the rest of your life, right? But you should be always like doing things that make you happy because Steve Jobs once said like if you wake up in the morning, you're looking at the mirror and you're not 100% committed to what you're about to do that day and like your answer that day is like you're not excited about that day, then you're doing something wrong and you should change it, right? And that's one of the reasons why I quit, right? My job, because my passion wasn't doing my job, and so I lost that passion. Today, even though I work a lot more, I'm doing what I love, right? And so my bosses or my clients when I'm working with them, like they feel that passion in my tone and my expressions and how I speak about the product that I help them with. So that's my first step there, right? And I'll just reiterate that second point here. It's really difficult to work hard when you're working for someone else's dream, right? There's this saying or this thing that I saw like on social media when the pandemic started about this guy that was coming out of the building and this other dude shows up in like a really nice like Lamborghini and he tells him like, wow, that's a really nice car. And he tells him like, yeah, if you work twice as hard and twice as long, then next year I'm going to buy the next model, right? And so that to me was like the turning point because I'm like, if I'm working so hard, right, and I'm like slaving myself as an employee, right, like is it worth it? Like, are you doing it for the right reasons? And for many of you, working for someone else is going to be your thing, right? But the takeaway here is like, make sure you're doing something you really want to work on, right? And as an engineer, and even within your specific disciplines, there's so many different things you can do. I can only speak to my computer science, computer engineering, right? But video game development and web development and app development and machine learning and like cybersecurity and like DevOps, like there's so many things you can do with an engineering degree. Don't get pigeonholed to do something just because you got a job and it helps you pay the bills, right? Like you need to be picky. Otherwise, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years from now, you're going to look back at your career and you're going to like, you don't want to have a life full of like what ifs or regrets, right? You want to have a life of, I did what I wanted to do and I made a dent in the world type of thing, right? And so find things that make you curious, right? Find things that you genuinely are interested in and that excite you, right? Like you should, everything you're working on, you should be asking yourself, like, what makes me, what excites me about what I'm working on, right? And when you're answering those questions, right, when you have the right amount of yeses or yes, I guess, to like these questions, right, you start finding out what drives you. And I don't know if you've ever seen Daniel Pink, I think is his name. He's got a talk about purpose. And his whole thing is what drives people, right? And they did an experiment on cognitive workers, which is us engineers, versus like manufacturing, right? People that just work with their hands and not necessarily their brains. And they found that if you give a like a machinist, right, or assembly line worker more money, right, they will work twice as hard. But if you give more money to an engineer, which is what we are, then they didn't see the same results. They didn't see a double improvement. And the reason is because as an engineer, you strive, like deep down inside of you, you earn for autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So those three things is what drives these cognitive workers, right? So in your job or in whatever you do, right, you want to be given some guidance, and then you want to have full autonomy. You want to be able to run crazy and get creative and figure out the solutions, right? You don't want people spoon feeding you stuff. You want to have mastery, right? You want to become really good at this. You want to become an expert, right? It's that sense of pride. And then purpose, right? Above everything else, like those contributions, right? Everything you do with your degree and with your skill set, right? It needs to matter. It needs to have an impact. And many of the times, so I've in my 11 years, I pretty much had 11 jobs, right? I only lasted about 1 year in each job. And it was just like, I never saw my purpose, right? I never saw my impact. I was just a busy bee doing work. And that is not something like a lot of people want to wake up to every day, right? Like it drains you a lot. So make sure that if you really, really want to be like really good, you go find these things, because when you get this right, like everything else becomes super easy. And then that's how you really become the best engineer, right? Because you would have figured out these things that take normal people 10, 15, 20 years in their career of trying things to figure it out. So I'm here summarizing it and giving you the shortcut, like the cliff notes, if you will, of life. Because it's taken me since 2012 that I graduated from Long Beach, right, until April of 2011 to figure this all out, right? And now I'm happy. Now I'm doing everything here. And now I'm really, really good at my job. And now I have no imposter syndrome. For ever since I was in college, I had the worst imposter syndrome. I felt like I never learned my material correctly. I can never do the calculus. I can never do the physics. I can never, like I got through Long Beach with C-SCET degrees. My GPA was a 3.3, which was respectable, but I always felt like I couldn't do it, right? And I turned down like interviews from like Microsoft and stuff like, and like Amazon, because I was just too scared, because I knew I was going to fail, right? But now with my like refound purpose and like I know what I'm doing, like I feel like I can take on any challenge, right? Because I've mastered these, or at least discovered these areas. So that's like the first one, right? Now I'm going to kind of pivot here a little bit. So your skills do win at the end of the day, right? Your ability to be good at something is going to stand out, right? You just need to do it in a way that you don't come off as a jerk or as an arrogant person, right? Being really, really smart is going to require you to develop not only just technical skills, but a bunch of soft skills, which I'm going to be talking about pretty much the rest of the presentation. Because the skills, while it is super, super important, it's only going to unlock the first door. But the rest of the doors are going to be unlocked with all those soft skills, because unless you're like working in Antarctica all by yourself, every job, no matter what you do in any like discipline of engineering, you have to work with people. And even if you're the best, right, the best engineers know how to work with others. And so your skills are going to win at the end of the day, but you better know how to bring everybody else up with you and master your craft, right? You should be practicing every single day. I spend 12 to 15 hours working on a product called Jira every single day, right? And I've been doing that for the last 6 months. And I was walking down, like just walking around my neighborhood, and I ran into an old coworker of mine. And in April, when I first quit my job, she asked me to help her with Jira, which is the tool that I do, or that's what I base my business around right now, right? So she asked me for some help, and I went and helped her. And I just ran into her like a week or two ago, and she asked me, "How's it going?" And I go, "It's going really well. Like, I'm like super excited, right? You can hear all the energy coming out of me." And she's like, "Whoa, where did all this come from?" I'm like, the best part is when I helped you with Jira, I was telling her, like, if you remember when you asked me for my help in April, like I used to know back then 1/10 of what I know today, just because I do this all day, every day for 12 hours. And I let my curiosity drive me into like new frontiers that I just didn't even know were possible. So master your craft and practice it every single day. And that literally just means like try to fail, try to just learn something new and try to master this thing, because eventually you're not going to have time to learn, right? As you grow through your career and you get married and you have kids and bills and mortgages and life gets in the way and kids go to practice. Like I have 2 boys right now, right? Like as soon as life starts taking over, every second of your life starts to have a lot more value. And right now in the position you guys are in, like your brain should be the most valuable thing you can have, right? You should be feeding that thing all day, every day if you can. And not sure if you read Outliers, but there's this thing called the 10,000 hour rule. Have any of you heard about it? 10,000 hour rule. There's a book, it's called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. He claims like the whole premise of the book is people like Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, all these guys, like they're really, really good at their craft because they practiced up to 10,000 hours of their skill, right? So now they're professional. So supposedly if you practice it right, if you practice your skill enough, after 10,000 hours, you're at what a PhD level or an expert level would be at. So that is allegedly, I've never actually calculated my time, but I can assure you, given how much time I spent in my tool, and like if we would have been having this conversation in April versus today, just 6 months later, like it's night and day with my attitude, right? Like just the amount of time that I'm spending in this thing, I know this thing really, really well. And so engineering is an art, right? I think a lot of people, specifically like within the world of engineering, they kind of just say, well, there was always like, at least with me growing up, right? There was always like the liberal arts type of thing. And then there was like the engineers, right? And even Long Beach is kind of set up that way, where all the LA 5, 4, 3, 2, 1s are all the way up on the completely opposite side of campus. And like the technical people are down at the bottom, right? But what I've learned over the last few years is that engineering really is an art, right? Like, even though it's all technical, like you can get very creative with your craft here. And even though there's always a right answer in mathematics, but there's creative ways for you to express yourself as you learn things, as you try new things, as you come up with new opportunities. Because many of you, again, SHIP is kind of an interesting thing because it's multidiscipline versus like ACM, that's always just like CS majors and stuff like that. But any aspect of engineering, right, you're always going to have, you want to strive to find a little bit of that creativity, right? Because I was always told I was an artist, right? But now that I've had time to kind of just like tap who I am and get to know myself better, like I do see myself like being more of an artist within my realm of being technical, right? Like the solutions that I come up with, to me, is like my art. And can people really rely on you, right? Like, and will someone want to have a beer with you? Those are the last 2 things I kind of wanted to end this slide here with. Is with respect to the skills, right? Are your skills good enough that people entrust that when you go do something, that it's going to get done right? But doing it right is not enough. I think they say like Google or a couple of other companies have this test, right, where when they're interviewing you or they're talking with you, right, one of the measurements that they're doing is like, would I want to have a beer with this person? Because being just the smartest person ever doesn't help you if you can't communicate. And it doesn't help you if you come out again as like being a jerk or arrogant, because people don't want to work with that. So you have to find that dichotomy, right? That balance between being super duper uber smart, but at the same time having empathy and humility and just being a nice and good human being. And you have to find the right balance between those two. Because if you tip the scales to only one, it's going to work against you, right? And so you kind of want to just find that right balance. So anyways, that's that. The next one is the best engineers practice extreme ownership. Anybody read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink? you guys need to read more, man. So Extreme Ownership is a book. When I read this thing, it completely changed my life. The notion is this guy, he's a U.S. Navy SEALs, right? So some of the best in the whole military, and some of the most disciplined group of men, I guess, and women now. Although I'm not sure. Never mind. Don't want to go down that route. But some of the best group of like military personnel, right? And it takes a lot to become a U.S. Navy SEAL because you have to go through what they call Hell Week, and it's not for the faint of heart, right? Like Hell Week is like really one of the worst things that any human being can go through, and they really try to break you, like physically, mentally, emotionally, in any way, shape, or form they can break you, they break you. And so this guy, he passed all that, and now he kind of just trains people. And then he was in Iraq during all the deployments that we had at post 9/11. Then he took all those concepts that he learned in the military, and now he makes millions of dollars like teaching businesses how to like take those military concepts of leadership and apply them to business. And so his book is called Extreme Ownership, right? And the whole premise of it is like literally you own every decision, right? And so at the end of the day, you own every outcome of every situation, right? Like even things that are completely outside of your control, if you can understand or wrap your mind around extreme ownership and just like knowing that everything is dependent on you, right? And every outcome of every situation is depending on at least how you react, then you start changing, right? You start being like not a negative Nancy in life, because you start realizing that you can make difference or changes in your life that can sway the outcome, right? And so when things go wrong, right, at least now, it's really easy. Like if you're working on a group project and the project doesn't get done, it's really easy to come and say, well, my teammates didn't help, right? And extreme ownership basically tells you like, well, this is your fault, right? Because you should have communicated. You should have found out why your teammate wasn't helping, right? Whereas maybe they didn't understand the requirements, so they didn't understand what they needed to contribute, right? And you as the lead, right? You should have reached out and kind of helped clarify. You should have reached out and try to understand what was happening with your teammate and try to get to the root cause as to why they didn't contribute. But it's really easy, and you'll see this in the rest of your life, where it's so much easier to just play the blame game than to take ownership of the actions that you take, whether they're good actions or bad actions. But I really recommend you read this book because it'll really change your perspective on how people that get by just blame everybody else, but the people that lead, right, the people that become the most successful, they rally their troops and they help get people overcome challenging situations, and they take full ownership of when things go bad. But it's not just taking ownership, right? It's reflecting and improving and pivoting and doing things differently the second time around. From his book, there's also this thing called like there are no bad teams, right? There are only bad leaders. And so I firmly believe like the best engineers, they understand this, right? And they work, they strive to become leaders themselves, but they also tend to work with the best leaders as well. Like A players usually naturally want to gravitate and work with other A players, right? And and so you'll notice this trend as you start going into the industry, right? Where you do see the elite people that are like really, really good. They tend to recruit other people that are really, really good, right? And anybody listen to that song by school? It's called High School Never Ends. Bowling for Soup, I think, is the band. Or am I dating myself? Yeah. So the song's called High School Never Ends, right? It's different faces, but the same game all the time. And corporate life is literally going to be high school again. There's cliques, there's groups of people that are already friends, that they're in a tight-knit relationship, and you're just a new kid on the block and you just move to a whole new school, right? And it's your career is going to be a lot like that, at least for the first few weeks, right? So that is very real. That is a very real scenario. And that is a very real environment that you're going to be thrown into every time you go get a job, right? And so it's really important that like you understand that these people, these A players, the best engineers in the company, they either A, don't want to be dethroned, so they'll see you as a threat, or B, they see you as adding value and like basically accept you into their circle of trust. And so it's going to go one of two ways for you. Either way, the outcome is again in your control. You got to check your ego too, right? A lot of people just don't like they don't like being like failure is bad, and I'll talk about failure in the next couple of slides here. But your ego is something that not, I mean, I doubt you've ever taken a class on like how your ego affects your performance, but like ego is like really, really big, right? And when you're working with really, really smart people, like egos get hurt a lot. You want to be very careful to make sure you're checking your ego, because you won't always be able to control other people's egos. But when you're in a high stress situation in engineering, the pressure is always on. Like if you guys think it's crazy right now that you have like midterms or finals, like wait until you build something and then people's lives are in danger. And this is completely sidetracked from not related to this, but when I moved back from St. Louis to California, I was at a hotel that Northrop paid for me to be at for like 2 months. And one day they decided to like do some, like they messed up our room somehow. And I went and talked to the front desk, and I go, hey, you guys made a mistake. And they're like, well, we're sorry. I'm like, it's like one thing to make a mistake, but it's like another thing of like, as an engineer, when you guys make mistakes, right? Depending on your line of work, but people can die, right? It's very serious, especially like structural engineers, right? Civil engineers. I don't know if any of you guys are in here. Electrical engineers, even computer engineers, right? Computer scientists, like everything you do from an engineering perspective, unless you're building Facebook or Netflix, but if there's a physical product that you end up building, it can have some serious repercussions, right? I worked on autonomous aircrafts. There's no pilot in there. People won't die if the plane falls, but it can very certainly fall on a people, right? And so people can die because I did something dumb or silly, or I didn't want to own up, right? Extreme ownership. I didn't want to own up to a mistake, and I try to hide my mistake because I didn't want my ego or my reputation crushed, right? And so those are scenarios where if you ever go back and look at engineering mistakes or like collapses of buildings or bridges and stuff like that, it's not so much that people didn't know something bad was going to happen, is that somebody didn't want to talk about it because they didn't want to take ownership of that mistake, right? And so I'm telling you now, don't ever, ever, ever try to hide these mistakes, right? Embrace failure and embrace the fact that you don't know something, to go learn it. And again, this is where it's so big with the ego, because naturally you're going to be inclined to be scared and not want to speak up, right? Because who wants to be that person that did that mistake, right? But I'm telling you, if you want to be the best engineer, you need to take that ownership and you need to go and fight those demons head on. Prioritize and execute, right? The best engineers are going to be able to like take an overwhelming amount of work, because if you think college is hard right now with like balancing 5-6 different classes and a bunch of homework, work gets way harder. I have 12 clients right now, and each one of them require 2 to 3 hours a day of me, right? So that is, if you did your math right, 24 hours of my time, but I only have 12 to 15 hours to give people because I got to sleep, right? And so I have to prioritize and I have to execute. Like I can't just sit on my problems and hope that they're going to go away. Like I have to take strategic actions and like execute, because if I don't execute, then somebody else will step in. Lead up and down. I think this is pretty important, especially with like Hispanics as well, right? we tend to fall into this a societal norm of like, we're good at being told what to do, but you're gonna feel, at least I did, right, that I just didn't belong. Like I didn't feel like I had any authority because I wasn't smart enough, or I didn't feel like my contribution would matter. And so what you end up happening, right, is you become really good at telling somebody else what to do, but you're not very good at challenging what you've been told to do. And so this is really important, because a lot of mistakes that have happened, again, when you go back and just review engineering disasters, right? I think Challenger was really a good example. Not Challenger. Which was the one that had the teacher in it? Was it the teacher one? No, that's the one that burned up on reentry. That was Challenger, right? The space shuttle. You guys know what I'm talking about? Back in like 2003 when that one.
Yeah, I don't think that was Challenger.
That one, right? NASA
I know the shuttle you're talking about. I just don't know the name.
Yeah. So that the one that didn't blow up going up, but the one that blew up coming in. That one was like a NASA thing, right? Like they acknowledged that there was a problem, and leadership at NASA was like, we're going to be fine. And there were engineers, I guarantee you, saying like, no, this is not going to be okay. But because they were scared that they would get fired, they were scared that they weren't going to be taken serious, or they were scared that they were going to cost millions, if not billions of dollars in damages, they didn't speak up and they didn't challenge up. They didn't tell their leadership, who leadership tends to sit on this throne, right? This like glorious throne of them being the best, right? And people are usually afraid to challenge up. And so I'm telling you right now that the best engineers are going to challenge up, right? They're not going to be afraid to make some noise when they know and understand and realize that something bad can happen. Again, as an engineer, the output of your guys' products, right? The things you're building with your mind and your brain can have the potential to kill people, right? And I don't think you learned this enough in school, right? Because you're so busy learning all the equations and math and everything else. But if your software, like if you're working on autonomous vehicles, right, and you're doing the machine learning for that vehicle, and you're supposed to identify an object, and somebody dies because your piece of code failed to recognize an object, like that's on you, right? That's you have full control of helping this out, or at least turning the outcome. So you really want to challenge up, because you're gonna face a lot of like military-esque style where like you do what you're told and that's it, and you better comply. And if you're ever caught working at a company that works like that, my recommendation is run away as fast as you can, because you do not ever want to compromise your ethics because somebody else told you you have to do it. So leave that job immediately if that ever happens to you. And don't ever, like, these are the questions you should be looking for or asking during your interviews for companies, because you want to find some questions that kind of you probe to see how they react to these kind of situations. Because if you won't know until you accept a job and stuff and you start working with them, when you find out that they have crappy leadership. So be very, very careful with that stuff. And then discipline equals freedom, right? So when you're the best, like, you literally get to control what's next, right? Like when you're at the top, like, nobody has to tell you what you can't do. So but you get to the top by having this discipline, right? This isn't for the faint of heart. Like, everything I'm talking about here, you're not going to just wake up and do it. Like, it's going to require some grit on your end to do it. The best engineers know how to persevere. I'm going to try to go faster because holy moly, I'm taking 15 minutes per each one. So Bob Iger, former CEO of Disney, he was in the restroom and his boss came in one day and he asked him, "How are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, to be honest, some days I can barely keep my head above water," right? Like treading water. And his boss, instead of being compassionate about the situation and like the fact that he was being overworked, he just told him, "Well, get a longer snorkel," right? So that you can, like, at least go underwater a little bit longer, because you're going to be drowning. And so the second you walk off that stage at Cal State Long Beach and you start that career, you are going to need the longest snorkel of your life, because life does not get any easier after you finish that last final. Work is going to be hard. You're going to have conflicting priorities. You're going to have to let people down. You're going to have to make decisions. You're going to have to break hearts. You're going to have to do challenging work, right? Not just from the technical side, but from like a very psychological or emotional perspective, right? And engineering is hard, and it only gets harder. Because again, right now, if you guys make a mistake, right, you get a B or a C or a D, or worst case scenario, you get an F. But that's it. Like, there's no impact other than like your grade. But you make a mistake in engineering in the real world, and you're building the next generation of a autonomous vehicle, or you're building the next generation of a skyscraper, and something tips over, like that pressure is on, right? And right now there is no financial incentive. I mean, there's some financial incentive of like, hey, I gotta finish school because I'm either A, gonna run out of financial aid, or B, I can't afford school. But again, you're talking in the thousands of dollars, which is very insignificant. And I say that almost jokingly, because I know as a college student, $1,000 is a lot. I guarantee you right now, though, I don't wake up like in the morning if I'm gonna lose like $2,000, I'm like, oh well, too bad. Like, thousands of dollars is insignificant, right? When your life is about millions, and all your engineering projects are going to be in the millions of dollars. And so there's a lot at stake now when you're talking millions and millions of dollars, right? So reworking a product, Boeing has a KC-46 tanker that they built. It's a big 767, stripped out, no seats, and they just put a big bladder and fill it up with fuel. And then all these F-15s or F-18s, F-22s, all the F fighters, they come up to it and they can refuel, right? So there's like a nozzle. I'm sure you've seen this on the internet. It'll refuel the aircraft, and then the aircraft goes and they keep fighting. So essentially, planes can stay in the sky forever, right? Like, so if you're in a war, so Boeing engineered this plane, right? And there's all any mechanicals in the room here? Any?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So listen up. So Boeing builds this aircraft. They physically built the entire plane. They filled it up with the fuel. They put it in the air, and then came the fighter jet, and the nozzle came out. There's a guy in his belly. He's navigating, like he's controlling with the little stick, the nozzle. He's trying to get it into the aircraft. They didn't fit. They designed it wrong from the beginning, like on day one in the picture. And so it cost Boeing $100 million to redesign that entire aircraft for that one mistake that they did. And so, like I said, engineering only gets harder, and then millions, if not billions of dollars become on stake, right? So you need to learn how to persevere, because this stuff gets really, really hard, right? You're going to be pulled on different teams, different projects, different work. Like, you're always going to be going wherever it comes and goes. So this is the hardest part that I've had to deal with. And like, I'm going to get a little serious here. Like, but how do you deal with failure, right? Like, because as an engineer, you're going to fail a lot. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for you to really make a lot of mistakes. And you're going to let people down, and people are going to let you down a lot. And you're not always going to succeed. And how you deal with those setbacks, right? Like, how you deal with not knowing an answer, or legitimately making a mistake that cost the company millions of dollars, like, that's going to define your character, right? And so at that moment, it's kind of like when you got your first F, if you ever did, or like a C, right? Or a B, depending on the type of student you are, right? Like, how did you deal with that emotion, right? Like, how did you deal with like that imposter syndrome that eventually starts building up when you have enough of these failures, right? It only gets worse in the industry, right? And you really need to learn how to face these demons like really head on, because the best engineers, right, they're gonna know how to cope with these failures. They're gonna know how to cope with setbacks, because they're always gonna hit you. There's a line in one of the Rocky movies where, what's his name, the main actor, the old dude now, Sylvester Stallone. He's telling the kid, right, that I think it's like all over TikTok, where he's telling the kids, like, life's gonna hit you hard, it's gonna push you on the floor, and then it's gonna keep you down. And like, as an engineer, that's gonna happen to you, I guarantee you, in your career, right? But how you deal with that challenge is how you're gonna get defined as an engineer, right? And so these best engineers learn from these failures. They come back from the setbacks, right? You improve and you get better. And you don't let that negativity like alter your course and go work at a different place, or go change out of engineering, right? Because I guarantee you there's going to be a moment in your life where life's going to hit you really hard as an engineer, and like, how you move forward and the decisions that you make is going to be very heavily dependent on your characteristics, right? Again, none of this is ever taught in your school, right? Like, you deal with a B or a C, and your teachers are like, well, try harder next time, right? But nobody's ever there to kind of like help and guide you and counsel you, because so much of engineering is going to be psychological that, again, it never gets talked about. But you have to learn and overcome these things, and eventually you learn about it, right? Eventually you pick up enough patterns of failures and you start figuring life out. But again, that's why I'm here to kind of tell you, it's like, hey, it is going to be really, really hard. And the sooner you learn how to deal with these bad things, like, the sooner you're going to be able to make progress in your life. And so ambiguity, I know for the people that are taking my class right at the 406, we made it hard. It was a feature and a bug, right? We got the class like a week before. Spoilers for everybody who's not in the class, but behind the scenes, right? Like, Robert called me up, the teacher called me up like a week before, and he was like, hey, I got to do a class. So we're figuring out day by day. But in life, like in your career, it's the same thing, right? I've been telling the class, like, we designed the ambiguity not because it was a feature, but really because it was a bug, and I'm covering it up as a feature. But that ambiguity is very real, right? Like, you're going to be giving so many conflicts. And I'm talking about easy mathematical concepts too. There's gonna be opportunities for you to like ethically challenge yourself, right? There's gonna be times where you're gonna be asked to look the other way when something bad is going to happen intentionally, right? For the sake of saving money or for the sake of saving somebody's job. And those things, right? Like if you don't have good ethics right now, you got to go check yourself, because if you don't control this now, right? If you have bad ethical characteristics or integrity and things like that, it's only going to get worse. So you have to, as the best engineer, like learn how to control all this and learn how to exceed when all these bad things happen, because they're going to happen and they're going to define who you are. And so you need to push yourself to learn new things and to become a utility player, right? Like that basically means like you just need to know how to roll up your sleeves and go help. Because the other thing is a lot of people tend to have this attitude of like, well, I didn't take a class, or that's not really my skill set, or I don't know how to do that. And they shy away and they walk away from a new opportunity. And I'm telling you, don't go and approach those opportunities. Going in, you don't have no idea what the heck you're doing, and just learn hour by hour and become better. So I really got to go faster. Okay, so engineers know how to play the infinite game, right? So finite games versus infinite games. Again, another great book. This one's by, what's his name? Simon Sinek. Sorry, I have books all over the place. I don't know if you guys see. I have books over there, and I have a whole bookshelf over here. So lots of books in my life. Finite games, we're in World Series mode, right? There's a clear winner and there's a clear loser, and somebody's going to win the World Series. Engineering is a game, right? There's going to be, I was telling you, it's like basically high school all over, right? Corporate life is literally just high school. So if you hated high school or you sucked at high school, you either A, got to figure it out so you can not do it bad this time, or B, if you were already good at high school, then you got to keep doing what you're doing, because yeah, corporate life is literally just high school all over again. But one key thing, even though you're playing a game, it's an infinite game, which means there are no defined winners or losers, and there are no rules to the game of engineering, right? Like everybody's playing a game, but everybody's playing it from a finite. Everybody thinks that there's a winner and that there's a loser and that there's strict rules. And if you follow these rules, you're going to make it in life. But what they don't tell you is that only the people that are, I'll say dumb, think life is finite, or that life is that finite game. It's an infinite game in engineering, right? And you have to have this attitude that I'm about to talk about right here, right? Because to be the best, it means like most people think that to be the best, you win enough, right? Tom Brady, best, he's a GOAT, not because he looks good, but because he throws a lot of good footballs, right? Like he's the GOAT because he earned it. Sorry, not anti-Tom Brady fans, but he's a good analogy here. But anyways, eventually people associate being really good at something as like that you're winning, but like there is no finish line in engineering, right? Like your career is going to start the second you walk off that stage, and 42 years later you're going to walk off that last stage, hopefully, right? When you sail into the sunset of retirement. But that 42-year life, even though it's well defined of 42 years, there's so many things, so many elements that are going to happen inside of it. So you need to have what's called a just cause, right? You need to have a vision of the future that does not yet exist. A future state so appealing that people are willing to make sacrifices in order to help advance towards that vision. And if you can wrap your head around that statement there, right, and really own it and kind of personalize it to what it means to you, this is what's going to drive you to prepare yourself for it, right? Because there's going to be so many times where life is going to be super hard, right? You're not going to know how to solve a problem. People's lives are going to be at stake, right? And unless you really have that ingrained into your life, right, of like, hey, I'm not here to get to this paycheck, right? I'm here for this journey. Then, I'm here for this journey to become the best version of myself, right? Then that's when, like, that's what's going to help divide you between being the best engineer and just being like a mediocre C student again, right? Because most people are, and I'll talk about it on another side, right? Most people are just thinking very short term, right? But an infinite game, you have to be thinking way beyond what your line of sight is. You need to be thinking way, way in the future and making decisions today to impact that future in 20 years. So you got to define your why, right? Like everything, this goes back to the passion, right? Everything you're doing is like, it needs to be important, right? You need to be able to rally behind it and throw 100% of yourself, or not 110%. You need to have the courage to lead. There's gonna be a lot of scenarios where people are scared, right? They're that ambiguity of not knowing what the heck you're doing makes people be shy. But you have to have the courage to lead and go and figure it out together as a team. But you need to be that leading force that sits at the front and grabs the troops and moves them forward, even when you have no idea where you're going. And then your flexibility, right? Like life's gonna throw you a ton of curveballs every day, every year of your life. And like, how do you dodge these things? How do you react to them? How flexible are you? And then do you have someone that challenges you? So a lot of people see challenges as a negative thing, right? Or an opponent as a bad thing, right? But as an engineer, you need to find a rival. You need to find somebody that you aspire that is better than you, so that you then have like a baseline so that you know if you're getting better, right? So you're not going to be like, the only way to know that you're the best is because you beat the best, right? And so until you find that North Star and you find that person or individual or idea that is the best version of you, then that's when you know you're kind of like, you've made it. All right, so growth mindset. Oh, typo here. Any of you read this book? Growth mindset? Who wrote this one? This is Carol Dweck or something like that. Sorry, my books are all over the place. Carol Dweck. It's this book is really good. It's all about like your mind, right? Like, how do you learn? How do you challenge yourself? What does success look like? Like, people think that they're born into greatness, right? Like Tom Brady wasn't born with the ability to throw a football. He got good, right? And as an engineer, you're not born with the ability to do calculus with your eyes closed and no calculator. Like, you're gonna get good at that, right? And so a lot of people think that you're either born a great engineer and that was your calling, or not, and then it wasn't your calling, right? But you can learn this. You can become a great engineer. You can become the best engineer. There's nothing about your DNA or who you are or any of that, like the color of your skin, none of that matters to become the best engineer, right? Like, it's all in your mind, and it's all in like how hard you want to work to become that, right? And so the way to get ahead in life is hard work, right? It's the ability to dig down and find strength even when everything's going against you, right? And again, I keep talking a lot about character, right? It's like, what does your character say about you, right? Where's your heart, your willingness, your focus, your determination, right? These things matter a lot. And I guarantee you probably have never learned any or talked about any of this in your classes or anything in your whole time at Long Beach, but it is super, super critical to your overall success in your career eventually, right? Unfortunately, again, a lot of people, specifically everybody that didn't attend this class, right, or this lecture here, they're going to figure it out eventually, but it's like going to take them 10 years. So at least now you have something to go think about, right? So personal success is when you work your hardest to become your best. This one I'll kind of go through quickly too, right? So the best engineer is not the smartest person in the room, and that kind of sounds like an oxymoron, right? But the skills are great. But at the end of the day, right, to become the best engineer, and I kind of talked about it at the beginning, right? It's a team effort, right? You're never, ever, 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 unless you're like a company of one person like me. And even then, I'm useless without the rest of the teams and clients that I work with, right? You're never going to be the best if you're not working in a team, right? So how well do you communicate your thoughts? How well do you motivate others? How well do you teach what you know? How well can you focus, right? How well do you empathize with your team? I've had a lot of situations where like people have come crying to me and I've gone crying to them, like at work. Like, crying and tears is a real thing, right? And like you don't learn about it, you don't talk about it. A lot of people like have a negative stigma at it, but you have pressures, right? You have to deliver these products. You have timelines, you have deadlines, you have millions of dollars at stake. You have people that are mad at you. You have people that aren't cooperating with you. You have people that are like sabotaging you, right? They're giving you bad information. They're like intentionally trying to make you fail. And like eventually your emotions like get the better part of you, right? Like I guarantee you there will be a moment in your career where you're going to cry or go home crying, because it happened to me many times, right? And so you need to like, how do you empathize with your teammates, right? A lot of the time, when you're working in a team and you ask somebody to do something and they don't do it, like you don't know what's happening in their lives, right? You don't know if their parents, somebody died in their family. You don't know if they had like a catastrophic loss of something. You don't know if they like something bad happened to them. You just know that they're not doing their part, right? And a lot of people you're taught to just like shove that under a mat and like go and do what you can do, right, to rectify the situation. But the best engineer, you're gonna learn how to empathize with your team. You're gonna learn how to have humility and empathy, and you're gonna learn how to work with people, and you're gonna build these bonds and relationships with the people you do empathize with that are gonna help build you, right? And the more of these networks and relationships that you have, the better of an engineer you're gonna be, right? And like this thing called like a sacrifice play, right? Like how often are you sacrificing yourself for the others, right? Right now in school, you're taught that you shouldn't be collaborating because you're cheating, right? If you guys are sharing answers, that is like a big no-no, right? But in corporate life, right, like sharing is caring, literally, right? And so you have to erase these thoughts of like you're only there for yourself and for your grade, because you're there for a family, right? Pre-pandemic, this was probably more evident, right? But I would spend 9-10 hours a day with my coworkers. There's this thing called like a work wife and a work husband. It's real. You fall in love with the people you work with, right? And you start building these extra relationships with your coworkers, right? And you start like building, no, I wouldn't say like they don't have to be like romantic love, right? But you do love the people you learn to eventually love with, like your coworkers, right? You give up things for them, like they're in your weddings, they're like your best man, your bridesmaid, right? Or maid of honor, right? Like those things are happening and they will happen, and they're going to be there when you're sacrificing yourself for others, right? When you go out of your way to help another person succeed in their career, right? And like how well do you see different perspectives, right? Like the people that you hang out with, like they define how and what you think, right? So are your group of people that you hang out with the right group of people, right? Like they all share a similar perspective, but you should be striving to have groups in different areas so that you can get different perspectives. And then I'll talk about that ego again, right? Like you need to keep your ego in check, because all of this is really easy to get your butt hurt, right? When you did something wrong, especially as an engineer, because you're taught that you always have to be right. But you don't always have to be right. This is from Jeff Bezos, second or first richest man in the world, depending on Tesla and Amazon stocks, how they're doing that day. But he wrote a book, and best engineers invent and they wander, right? So how often are you taking risks? I'm sure you've heard of the story from Amazon, right? They basically sucked like the first 10 years, first 15 years. And now they're like taking over the world. But Bezos firmly believes that Amazon is the greatest company in the world, not because of what they're working on today, but what they worked on 5 years ago, right? They took these risks. The Fire Phone was a failure, but every other product that's come out of that, from that learning of how to build a crappy product, they've improved every other product, right? But you can't learn things if you play it safe. You have to take these risks, right? So you have to find out like how often do you try things just to see if they work or how they work, right? You have to have that curiosity. You have to like try, but then the key part, none of this works if you don't track the progress or do the feedback loop, right? You need to take that curiosity and those trial and errors, but then you have to make smart decisions based on that knowledge, that newfound information, right? Because if you do the bad thing over and over and over and over and over, like you're never going to get good, right? You're just making the same mistake over. So you have to stop, check yourself, pivot, and then try something different, and then learn again, and then do that forever and ever for the rest of your life until you die, essentially. But yeah, I think the measurement here on your impact on society is really key, right? Like as these cognitive workers, like one day you're going to look up at a building, like if you're a structural or civil engineers or mechanical engineers, one day you're going to look at some product and you're going to go, wow, I built that, right? Like I worked on C-17s when I was at Boeing. Every time I see a C-17 flying, I go, I helped build that, right? Like you get a tremendous sense of pride for the products that you build and the things that you get to create. I worked at Brain Corp. They basically make Roombas for like Walmart. So every time I go to a Walmart and I see a big old robot, I can go, hey, I helped put the software on that robot. And so it's like you get this really, really great sense of an impact, right? And the greater the impact, the better or the more motivated you'll be to perform better, right? And at the end of the day, right, we're engineers, and 100% of all of the world problems that we have today are going to be solved by engineers, right? So I don't think you can say that about any other discipline, but engineers really do have the potential to fix any problem that we're facing today, right? Whether it be political, whether it be like medical, right? Some form of engineering is going to be changing the world. And you're seeing that already with all the robots that are coming out, all the medical stuff that's coming out, like all the biomedical stuff, right? Our buildings of the future, like our food, right? Our shortage of food, right? How are engineers going to engineer new ways of creating food? Scientists and science is going to help a little bit, but their theory, right? They're like, they're imagining a world that can be, but engineers take those imaginations and actually build this stuff, right? And so you want to find something that's going to help you put your little dent in the world. And this is mainly for the ladies in the call, right? But there's a great book, Sheryl Sandberg. She's the COO of Facebook, right? And she wrote something called Lean In. And it's very important that you lean in, right? Specifically, ladies in the room, but also, again, us as Hispanics, right? It's very easy for you to not have that confidence, not feel like you belong. It's really easy for you to just fall under the stigma of like, you should be so lucky you're even allowed to be in the room, right? Don't ever fall for that, right? The whole premise here is go sit at the table, go be part of the conversations, go contribute. If you have information, because again, your skills are good, right? Remember we talked about you have to have the best skills. You've done the homework, you put in all the hours. Don't be afraid to speak up, right? As long as you're speaking truth and not like falsifying information, you're going to be rewarded. But don't be afraid to be a part of that conversation, because these conversations and these decisions are going to happen with or without you, right? And so it goes back to Bill Gates and Paul, what's his last name? Co-founder of Microsoft. Paul something. Who's going to help me? Who's co-founder of Microsoft? Pop quiz. Paul something. I know it's Paul.
Paul Allen.
Yeah, Paul Allen, right? Paul Allen walks into the Harvard dorm room. Bill Gates gives him the copy of that magazine with that Altair 6800 on the cover and goes, this is going to happen with or without us, right? And so Bill Gates got up and they went and made a fake operating system that didn't exist yet, right? So these decisions, as an engineer, these companies are going to make decisions, right? You might as well get really good and go be a part of them, because they're going to make those decisions with or without you. And life works a lot better in your favor when you speak up and you sit at the table and you're a part of the conversation. But it's really easy to walk into a conference room and sit on the side and be quiet, because that is super easy. It takes very little effort, but the amount of energy and courage that it takes to sit at the table in front and challenge a director or a VP or a C-suite executive, it takes guts. But again, if you know your stuff and you do it in an empathetic way with humility and like kindness and love, like you will exceed light years ahead of your competitions. And then find a mentor or be a mentor, which is why I do this stuff, right? Because if I didn't share my knowledge with you guys, like then I take it to the grave with me. But at least now, I don't know how many people are on this call, 15 of you will at least have something to go think about. And then I think we're almost done. Yeah, here we go. So the best engineers believe everything's forgettable. What's her name? She's really good. Marie Forleo. She wrote this book, Everything is Forgettable. And she's not an engineer. She's not any technical thing, right? But she has this concept of you can figure it out, right? When I was at Long Beach, my teacher didn't show up one day and they sent in the IT support guy. He used to fix the computers for the CCS department when they break. And so they sent him to teach my 211 class in electronics, because it made sense, right? Because computers have electronics and that guy should be able to teach an engineering class on electronics, right? And so he shows up and he has no idea what he's doing and he's never taught a class before in his life, but they needed a teacher because the professor didn't show up that day or they canceled the class, right? And so he struggled a lot, right? He had no idea what he was doing. And that was probably the hardest class for any student to take, very similar to what I'm experiencing in our 406 class, right? Where you feel like this is a waste of time. Professor doesn't know squat. I don't know why I'm doing this, right? But out of everything I learned at Cal State Long Beach, okay, 5 years I spent there, I learned only one thing that I use every single day today. And that came from that person that was not even qualified to teach a class. And he told us when we didn't know how to do something, right? And we asked him like, hey, can you help us? And he's like, I can't help you because I don't know what the heck you're talking about. He told us, you're an engineer, go figure it out. And I use that more than anything else in my career. Every single day, whenever I find some sort of challenge or just something that I don't know, I use that principle of I'm an engineer and I go figure it out. I cannot tell you anything I learned in any calculus class, any physics class, or any engineering class, but I can tell you that I use that thing every single day as an engineer. Okay. And so figure it out. Like literally, you have the ability, you have every resource. Like when I was in your guys' positions, like we didn't even have Dropbox. Like the internet was, Wi-Fi was barely coming out in 2007. Okay. So like we were in a completely different position. So you guys have an infinite amount of resources to like literally figure everything out. And if you have this mentality that somebody has to teach it to you, you're going to fail as an engineer, because there's never ever going to be someone that's always going to be there to hold your hand, right? It's up to you to take everything I've talked about in this hour and 13 minutes, right? And really like take that to heart and figure out, what am I going to do with this newfound information, right? It's something that I guarantee you would eventually learn, but again, it will take you a few years to learn. So eliminate the excuses, right? Overcome your fears. Everything, a lot of people and a lot of like engineering is like climbing Mount Everest, right? It's like this impossible dream or this impossible mission, right? But it starts with one step. People have climbed Mount Everest, right? But they took a step and then another one, and then they stopped for a little bit and they kind of reevaluate and question their life choices. But then they realize, I want to climb this mountain. So they keep going and then take another step, right? So you have to do that with engineering, right? Because it is so hard. Engineering is hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But you guys have taken this initiative, right? And you, like, I was first generation. I don't know if you guys are first generation, right? So like to me, it was even more important because my family, the whole purpose in life was get out of high school and contribute and help pay the bills, right? So this college was like a thing that got in the way of helping me feed the family, right? And so I had that extra pressure of like, hey, was this even worth it? Because what if I can't get a job? Or what if I'm not good enough, right? So you're going to have all these doubts that are going to come into your head. Your family, if it's anything like my family, I have gotten zero support. Like my mom told me that me quitting my job was the dumbest thing that I could have done in my life. Because in reality, it's who quits their job in the middle of a pandemic when everybody's getting fired, right? And so I have had little to no support like from that perspective, right? But I know, and I knew deep down because of everything I've taught you, right? And because I knew fundamentally to my core and my belief and my identity and who I am, that this was the right call. And so now I was like, I comfortably make like $1,000 a day, like no question, right? 7 days a week almost. And so I wouldn't have gotten to this point had I played it safe and had I followed the advice that everybody tells you, just like keep your head down, stay in your lane, and do what's easy. Because if you want a mediocre career and you want to be a mediocre engineer, then follow the advice from mediocre people. But if you want to be the best, then go listen to the people that have made it and then follow them, right? And so I'll kind of leave you at that. I'll send out the slides if you guys want to read through them. But I guess at the end of the day, right, like you guys are like ultimately in charge of your guys' career, and you can put up all the excuses you want to not be the best, but every single one of you in this room has the potential to be the best. It's just how badly do you want it? So I'll leave it open to questions or discussions. Here's my contact information if you want to get a hold of me. ART's 1989. I think I opened up my LinkedIn now, but ART's 1989 at gmail.com is for the LinkedIn, or find me or send me messages on anything, and I'll be more than happy to help you out, answer questions now, today, tomorrow, whenever you guys have any questions about life, college, careers. Use me as a resource, because one of the reasons why I do this is when I go out through college, I went on a tangent there earlier, but I didn't have anybody, right? Nobody had ever gone to college in my life. Nobody had ever gone a real career. Everybody had just worked jobs in their life in my family. And I had nobody to help me. And I would have paid $1 bazillion just to have access to somebody to tell me if I'm doing this right or wrong. So use me as a resource. I'm here for you. And yeah, don't be shy and feel free no questions a dumb question, and yeah. So I think I'm done with the presentation, but I'll stay on if you guys want to chat or ask questions.
Quick reminder for everyone here. If you haven't signed in to the Google Forms, you should. Here's our socials. Should you like to stay around, please do. We'll have a nice chat.